This is Stephanie at Hightower Stitching, and I've been trying to make this video. This is the third time, so this should be the charm. Today's is about Grandma's Patriotic sampler and has to do with choosing a pattern, piecing the blocks, and doing the finishing quilting. I had just finished two queen-size quilts, and I was ready to do something a little different. And I thought I might like to do some hand piecing for a while because you can carry that with you, and there's no hurry. You don't have to keep your machine set up or anything. So I started looking through the magazines, and I saw this red and white quilt, and the stars and the blue is so pretty. And I realized that I had red fabric that I had never used. It was a quilt kit that I had bought, and I didn't make, so I had plenty of red material to use for that. And this quilt was in the Love of Quilting, May, June 2019. And what I found out, and this happens a lot with the quilts now, that they give you the list of materials that you need, and then they tell you how to cut it. But what you end up doing is you're cutting the whole quilt out at once. Well, I found that sometimes there are blocks that are not my favorite, and I really don't want to spend that much time or that much money making a whole quilt. So I looked at their directions, and I was able to decipher what it would take to make one block to see if I liked it. This is the quilt, a 10.5-inch block, and it turned out to be a lot of fun, and it seemed to fit together really well. And so I made another block out of some of the red, and it turned out like this. And there again, I was very pleased. Now, these blocks end up to be 10.5 inches roughly. And then a lot of times people take and square the blocks. I found out that's usually when I end up in more trouble, is when I start trying to be real neat and square. So I wait till I'm all finished. And this one's going to have a sashing, so the blocks won't be right next to each other. But the blocks have give and take because of some of the bias edges they have. So don't get too excited about cutting them down to size it for a while till you get going. But then as I got going, and I said, oh, let's get this going. And so I went to the sewing machine and I started sewing the pieces together. And they went really well. I opened all the seams that I like to open. Then every once in a while, though, I'd look at the back side and I'd see, okay, how are we doing on our points? Are my points pretty good? And most of the time they were. If there was a problem, they weren't deep enough. So I just go back in there in that little part and make the seam a little bit wider. And then pretty soon I had 20 blocks finished and I was ready to put the quilt together. I wasn't going to do 42 this time. And this is the quilt that I ended up with. And I thought, now I don't need another quilt laying around, so what could I do with it? Well, I have a 12-year-old grandson who's going to have a birthday. And I said, this is great, nice and patriotic, and great colors. So I sewed it together and put the sashing on it. And the sashing was really nice. It's a nice blue color. Then came the part of getting ready to quilt each one of the blocks that were in the quilt. And I already knew there was going to be an issue because some of the pieces were so little. If you look at the little pointed pieces, they're very small. And I had been used to working really big on those queen-size quilts. So I had to think, I don't think I'm going to do each little piece separate. So then did I want to do parts together or the whole block as a whole? And I said, well, that's a lot of good decisions to make. And I said, I don't think I'm going to make all the blocks the same because, one, that's boring to me, and especially for this, which was going to be a fun quilt for my grandson, that gave me a lot of room for what I wanted to do. So I grabbed my practice samples, which I like because that shows me how things really look sometimes. And then I went to my favorite sketchbooks. That's one of my favorite ways right now to keep notes and to keep samples and drawings. I can sit at the computer for hours and work on things and put them in the books. And one of the things I did do is I put page numbers on them now. I didn't have them before. And that's come in helpful because I have book 1, I've got book 2, and I just bought book 3. And they include everything from threads to stitching to some of the sites that I love to go to, and the people that run those. And so, but for this project, I said, I think I'm going to combine some of the parts of the block together. What are some things that are smaller that I could do that might go in there? And then even if I wanted to consider the block as a whole, what could I use? And so on a piece of paper, I'd write down 1 for book 1, and I'd pick a page, or I'd just draw it on my little paper, a little sample, so I'd know what it was. And I went through the books, because I knew if I had 20 blocks, I was going to have a lot of entertainment there. And so this is what I came up with. This is my sampler, Grandma's sampler. And I did it in different ways, and sometimes I used red threads, sometimes I used blue threads. I've got pebbles, I've got clams, I used the ruler foot, I used the walking foot, I used some of the rulers with the ruler foot, and then right now I'm into doing feathers, and I finally think I've got a little bit of a handle on it. So I snuck some feathers into a block, which aren't going to show up very much or mean anything to him, but they mean a lot to me. And then I have a block that's got his name in one of the corners. The other part of the quilt was the back, and that turned out to be fun because it was a boy. I didn't want to put a white back on there, and so that was nice. And so you think about that too. You know, these are decisions you think about when you make a quilt. Now, in this light, the blue doesn't look like the brilliant blue that it is, but this is the blue sashing that was on there, and I thought, these are just little 2-inch lines. What can I do that'll make those really interesting and go along with this patriotic kind of a theme for this sampler? So for that part, I remembered seeing a wave in one of the pieces I had practiced on from my machine, the stitching, and you can see this really neat wave that goes across here. But of course that was way, way too small for what I needed. And so I did a little measuring, and I came up with a template that I could use to draw on those sashing, and I took it and I'd lay it on the quilt, and I went around it with chalk. Here I've done the air erase marker so you can see it. And you can see this video I've done one other time already, and so excuse the extras. I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to go down and get my bottom thread up. And I found, oops, didn't quite go far enough. And I found that I like my tweezer. I can find it every time I need it, and I can pull it up if I've got it in the right place. And you can see I didn't, there it is. Okay, there it is. Now I got both threads up. They won't get tangled in the back. And I'm going to take my, not dirty, just dyed gloves, and I'm going to show you how neat this one was, because it was in a 3. And when I was doing the quilt, I didn't do a line that went all the way across. I just did it in sections. You'd go up, and you double back, and you double back, and you'd be ready for the next one. And remember, this is your quilt. Nobody says those lines are going to be gone. Now, it's a little harder to do with this small piece of paper, small piece of fabric. When I was doing it with the big quilt, it really moved a lot better. But you get the idea. And there I could go. And when I got to the long lines, I could do a section after section after section. So I hope in watching this that I gave you a little inspiration, or that you think of a project that you'd like to do and a way to attack it. This is Stephanie at Hightower, and just sew on and sew on.